So it's my distinct pleasure today to invite Mr. Bikhchandani to the stage. He's someone who doesn't need much of an introduction. Sanjeev is the founder and the executive chairman of InfoEdge, which is, I think, one of the first Indian internet companies, certainly the first one to be profitable, and I think the first one to be listed on an Indian exchange. He started his entrepreneurial journey in 1990, and in the last 30 years, I think many of us would be very familiar with the various properties, the brands, the businesses that have been built. Principally, I think it's India's leading online classifieds company in the segments of recruitment with Naukri.com, matrimony, which is Jeevan Sathi, real estate, education, and other related services. They've also made investments in many other segments. For example, Zomato, which is one of the leading food delivery companies, Policy Bazaar, Merit Nation. And some of you may be familiar, they've also invested in several businesses which are classic impact enterprises. We are very fortunate at Asha Impact. Recently we co-invested with InfoEdge in an agri-tech company, which is an investee of theirs called Gramophone. They've invested in a company called MedCords, which is working in rural healthcare. They've invested in something called Khata Book, which works with MSMEs. So I think no further introduction is needed. Welcome, Sanjeev. Thank you for being here with us. Great. Thanks for being here. So we have about 40 minutes or so, and I thought we'll take about 20, 25 minutes just to set the context, ask a few questions, and then maybe open it up for the audience as well. So first question, Sanjeev, since we're here to talk to impact investors, is this question of what constitutes impact and how do you look at investments? Traditionally, when people who are coming from the impact investment world, we speak about either service delivery or income enhancement. And obviously, when you talk about a company like Naukri or even Zomato, so can you share your overall approach to this? Do you think of impact as an asset class, or how do you think about it?
So look, I don't know what impact investing means, right? We don't regard ourselves as impact investors. We don't invest for impact. We invest for profit. Now, it so happens that when you invest for profit, or when we invest for profit and a company succeeds, it very often makes impact. So our primary goal is not impact. Our primary goal is profit. But if you look at Zomato, for example, we invest for profit. We continue to be there for profit. But Zomato has currently providing livelihood to maybe 2.5 lakh, a little under 2.5 lakh motorcycle riders. It is enabling 1.8 lakh restaurants to do business. Maybe it's some of those businesses are growing probably, and therefore it's possibly helping maybe 500,000 people get jobs there, right? Now, but that's not the primary goal. The primary goal is profit. Or if you look at Naukri, the primary goal is profit, right? But it's 80,000 organizations are hiring through Naukri. We've got 6.1 crore, 6.5 crore resumes there. So 1 in 20 Indians is there. Wow. Okay, maybe 20,000 resumes being added every day, 300,000 updates every day. A lot of people are finding jobs. Now, our primary goal is not impact, but impact happens, right? You end up making impact by trying to do other things. That's the way we look at it. Similarly, when you talk about, say, Shop Kirana or Gramophone, I mean, yeah, you can call them impact, but that's not why we invested. We invested because the guys were good, doing good stuff, looks like it could grow and make money and scale. Let's back in and see what happens.
So primarily the objective is scale, and if the scale is achieved, then it creates impact.
I think primarily, it's very hard. So when we looked at Zomato for the first time in 2010, right, it was doing 1 lakh a month of revenue. It had, 3-city operation. And all the conversation in our company was, this thing can be a 20 crore company. Why? Because how many restaurants are there in India? How many cities will you need a search in? The restaurants are, standalone mom and pop businesses. They don't have marketing budget. What's going to happen, right? And then we said, guys seem good, product is good, it's getting repeat traffic, it's got natural traction. Something will happen, right? So we put 4.5 crores, which then was $1 million, and we took a third of the company, right? And said, let's go in there with a leap of faith, prayer on our lips, right? And figure it out, okay? Likewise, Naukri, when we launched Naukri, we bootstrapped for 3 years. When we launched Naukri, there were only 14,000 internet accounts in the country, right? So scale is, at that time, the extent of our ambition was, if we can get 1,000 companies to give us 500 rupees every month to, to list one job in a month. That's 5 lakhs a month, that's 60 lakhs a year. And you can do it in 30 lakhs, you make a 30 lakh profit. So, and then if I can take 10 lakh salary, I'm happy. Right? 10 lakh was big salary for me in those days. I was at that time earning zero salary. So, that was the limit of my ambition. Right? When we raised money from ICICI Venture in April 2000, right? In our business plan, we had said 4 years, we were doing 3 lakhs a month revenue, and we had said, look, 4 years out, in 2004, we will do 12 crores, right? Now, 4 years out, in 2004, we did 84 crores. We were wrong by 7x. So markets can surprise you, right? When it's very early on, you can have a fuzzy dream of, changing the world. But really, you got to look at next month's sales, next month's collections, and next month how you're going to pay salary, right? And therefore, yes, scale is nice. You look, you hope for scale, but you run for this month.
Got it. So just to move it away from this question of impact, because it's really about your investment philosophy, right? And many people, including in the impact world, have this aversion towards high burn businesses, right? And marketing spend, and internet businesses are particularly notorious for that, and whether it's a shop kirana or even a gramophone. So how do you, reconcile with that? What are the lessons from, let's say, InfoEdge and building such a massive business for investors like us who are scared sometimes of investing in high burn businesses?
Yeah, so burn is not something even we are comfortable with. But burn, in today's market, given competition, given the kind of money coming in from overseas into India and going into competitive companies of the ones we invested, our companies are also, nudged and pushed into raising more and more capital. Now, we have a small balance sheet compared to some of the big funds out there, so we can't really invest that kind of money. So our strategy is to go in really early, hopefully with the first check-in, right? We believe we are better than most financial investors at identifying early on what's got promise, because we are entrepreneurs ourselves, we have been there, done that, and so we know what to look for. Now,
so what is that?
So this notion may be misplaced. Huh? I mean,
but what do you look for in the early stage? It's so hard because there's such a high failure rate.
So we look at early signs of natural traction. Natural traction means you're getting traffic, and traffic is growing without advertising. It's hitting a hot button. It's getting some buzz. It's number one. Number two is we look for maybe some revenue.
Yeah.
Although we have gone pre-revenue also, it's not that we haven't. We definitely look for the ability to hit a hot button. You can, so if you're solving an unsolved problem, you're getting natural traction, chances are you'll hit a hot button, right? You hit a hot button, you don't have to sell, customers will buy, right? And if customers are buying on their own, without you having to sell, I think that's a very good sign.
Yeah.
Right? And now, hopefully, they're buying at a price which is above your cost, and therefore, hopefully, it's positive unit economics, and then you can scale that and, get some. We're not really fussed by a seemingly small market size, because in Naukri, we had that experience, that we had thought we'd do 12 crores, we did 84 crores, because when markets get disrupted, when things change, thank you.
And the market size may change with the development of technology.
We had no clue how big Naukri would become. We had no clue what internet penetration would be like. We had no clue, where valuations go. We had no clue we'd go public, right? When we first launched. Pani hai, thank you. Right? Okay.
Got it. So you're looking for natural traction. You're looking for some revenue
traction. So when you're
traction.
going very early, we look for natural traction. We go in, we work hard, and we pray hard. Hopefully if you've done 8, 10, 15, if 3, 4 work out, it's okay. We've done 22. Zomato and Policybazaar have definitely worked out, right? And that makes up for the rest. And there are some 3 or 4 other promising ones as well.
Yeah.
And yes, some have failed.
And any red flags?
But I would not recommend early stage impact investing, saying I will do 1 company or 2 companies, 3 companies. No. That's bad idea.
What about the red flags? What do you look for that to not be there? The obvious stuff which other people make those mistakes. What have you learned from the failures?
So I think assessing the quality of the founders or the management team, what are their motivations, what are the capabilities. When a guy is 28 and you're looking at him and you say, can he run a 4,000 strong team 7 years out? You don't know. What is his idea of how to treat minority shareholders? Does he fully comprehend the responsibilities of an entrepreneur?
The maturity or?
No, responsibility. See, the thing is, so I'll tell you a few things that, so I was 37 when we raised our first round of money from ICICI. So I had, seen enough of life, right? And I think a couple of things that ICICI Venture, who was our first investors, told me openly before we signed. He said, just remember, number one, it is no longer your company alone. It is also our company. Number two, you can get rich only when we get rich. So don't think of a secondary sale, don't think of setting your own salary. We will decide your salaries.
Yeah.
Number three, you can't sell any shares without taking our permission. And we won't give you that permission. Okay. Number four, remember your independent directors and your auditors are there to save you from yourself. Right? Now, if you can't internalize all these four, don't raise the money.
But that's fantastic hearing that from an entrepreneur, because sometimes entrepreneurs feel, that the venture capitalists are being too onerous. But what you're saying is that there's a necessity for these basic things.
Yeah, these are broad principles. I mean,
Yeah.
and look, I had been taking zero salary for the last 3 years. So, I had no problem saying yes to all this, right? That you can set my salary, it's okay. Any salary you give me is better than what I'm doing right now, right?
Yeah.
So it's really where you're coming from, really expectation. But look, when there's too much money in the system, so often these principles are forgotten.
Yeah, cool. Coming back to the market, right, and trying to make the link between technology and impact and all of that, how do you see the rural consumer market? Because one way to think about impact investing is there's tier 1 markets, there's tier 2 markets, there's tier 3 markets. Traditional VCs invest for the top, philanthropists and charity invest for the bottom 200 poorest, but that middle 500, x 100 million Indians. So how do you see that market, and specifically the consumer preferences? What do people need to have, what's good to have, and what's nice to have, right? You have the best understanding of the consumer psyche.
So I'm not sure that's true, but look, I think fundamentally consumers are the same everywhere. They look for what's good for them. They look to solve some unsolved problem, right? It's just in different contexts, different consumers may have different unsolved problems, right? So it's up to the entrepreneur to go out there and figure out that this is my target consumer, these are the unsolved problems, this is how I'm going to solve it, and this is how I can construct a solution where the unit economics are positive, where I'm selling at a price where he's getting value, therefore he's buying more and more, but at that price, I'm making money.
Exactly.
And my delivery system is such that, I can scale it and still make money and recover my overheads. Now, very often that's a challenge because see, in the annual value or lifetime value of each individual consumer, especially as you go down to lower income groups, right, may not be as high.
Exactly.
You still got to make margin. And then if you're not making that, if the absolute margin isn't that much, then you've got to get volumes to make money. Okay, the challenge is there.
Yeah. So the classic definition of impact investing, a lot of definitions get thrown about, but the one that we use at Asha Impact, which Vikram and Pramod and other business leaders have come up with, is as simple as profitably delivering services to underserved customers, right? So that's just a basic definition of business. So in this case,
but underserved could be rich guys also.
Correct.
Right? I mean, he's underserved.
Exactly.
Point is, he's underserved, which is why he will buy your stuff.
On a relative basis. So a rural consumer, let's say, is more underserved, and he has that income constraint.
Yeah, so basically what you're saying is, underserved means people, consumers whom others don't care to serve about because they don't seem to be that profitable for them.
Exactly. Or there's too much of a market above that. There's too much low-hanging fruit, so not enough entrepreneurs on there.
So, I'll tell you something. We have now done 4 or 5 or maybe 7, 8 businesses inside the company, right? And we've invested in 22, 23 others outside the company, startups. And we've realized a couple of things. We have succeeded wherever we have gone and solved an unsolved problem and been first mover, right? So we launched Naukri in 97. The first competitor came in 2000. We had a 3-year head start. Nobody thought of it, right? So you go in early and you get everything else right, you have a very good chance of building a moat. So wherever you succeeded, whether it's Zomato, Policy Bazaar, we were years ahead of competition. We were kind of left field way out, and nobody thought of it. So the key to make money in investing is to go today where the herd will go 3 years from now. because that's what bids up your valuation. And you're already in there at a lower price, lower cost, right? Now, in this process, you'll get some wrong.
Yeah.
Because the herd may not go there. It was two-way out. Or, the idea that you thought would work did not work. That'll happen. So you got a portfolio, it'll be okay. But Naukri was way out when we started it. Policy Bazaar was way out when we invested in it. Zomato was way out. So all of these companies had worked.
Exactly. And that's the same approach impact investors take. And we're not crazy, or we don't think we are at least. We're just taking more risk. But ultimately, we realize that for companies to scale, they have to attract mainstream commercial capital. So ultimately, we're just taking more disproportionate risk, saying before the commercial capital becomes more involved, we have to take the risk to de-risk those models. But ultimately, the business is going to scale.
I think in rural India,
the ICICIs have to come there.
In rural India, the logistics of distribution, the logistics of, it's harder, right? You got to put the product out there many more kilometers for that much lower margin, right? And therefore, the search for efficiency, right, is the challenge.
Yeah.
How do you make money by servicing a village?
Yeah. So there's 3 or 4 challenges, Sanjeev. So you've mentioned one of them, which is the pricing and the profitability challenge and the entrepreneur looking at the unit economics effectively, right? You've also mentioned the flip side, which is we often look at the behavioral change challenge, which is we're looking at rural markets and push versus pull products. You're clearly saying that shouldn't happen. You should only go after those products where there's an inherent traction, where the consumer is demanding it. And then the third challenge is
or the consumer will demand it. See, I'll tell you, when you look at Policy Bazaar
so first, you can build the market there.
When you look at Policy Bazaar first, it was a PowerPoint, right? And Firesidechat came to my cabin and he said, I'm willing to bet you are paying 60% more for your car insurance than you ought to be. And I said, really? So he had a spreadsheet and a prototype and something, and he said, pull out a car insurance paper. So I pulled it out from my bag, my car insurance papers. He said, give me your car name, model number, year, whatever, color, self-drive, a few details. And he got me 9 quotes. Yeah. And sure enough, the lowest one was 40% lower than what I was paying. And that convinced me that, look, there's a market, this is going to work. So it's not they're demanding it, but consumers don't know, they will demand it when they find it.
Got it. So that's the aspect about the natural traction. And the third aspect I wanted to bring was the value chain challenges. So in the classic example we give in our sector is financial services versus agriculture. So 90% of impact investment flows into FS, microfinance, SME finance, all of that jazz. And people say there's 2 reasons for this. Basically, it's a profitable sector, it generates 4% ROA, but why does it do that? And this is smart entrepreneurs have been going into it and so on. Because of business correspondence, because of priority sector lending, because of Jandhan, Aadhaar, mobile, this and that. In other words, the value chain, the sectoral aspects got fixed. There's a credit bureau and so on. Whereas in other sectors, they're not there. There's an APMC Act, there may be supply chain issues, there may be cold storage issues and so on. So then entrepreneurs are told, why are you in this sector when all the things are broken? You have a doubly hard task. You have to deliver a profitable service to the customer, and you're dealing with these weird broken value chains. But as an investor, one is anyways going into those sectors, right? So I want to ask you specifically about your thesis in these 2 very challenging businesses, Gramophone and Medcords. Rural India, companies working, in this case, Gramophone is actually in the room, Tausif is here, working with smallholder farmers in Madhya Pradesh, and in the case of Medcords, I think it's in Rajasthan, right? And let's be honest, even several impact investors have looked at some of these businesses in the past and found them too risky. And here we have someone who says, I'm not even looking at impact, but I see the massive market potential of these businesses. So how did you underwrite these 2?
So I think first thing, we don't have a fund. We don't have to give somebody else's money back in 7 years or 8 years, right? So in Policy Bazaar, we invested in 2008 and we invested in 2019 again. And we continue to invest right through. So if you've got, so we are really patient capital, right? Now, if you've got a fundamentally solid and sound value proposition, you will succeed. You may take longer, but you will succeed. Hopefully, if you're executing well, you're a good guy, you will succeed. Okay? And if you're patient, the other thing about going into rural India or underserved markets is there is lower competition, right? It's a much safer thing than investing in a horizontal e-commerce company right now. Let me tell you, right? Sorry. No. Okay, so therefore, I think risks have to be dissected, understood. You get comfortable with them, you manage them, you mitigate them, right? Now, if you look at Gramophone, right?
Yeah.
And we looked at it and we said, okay, it is e-commerce, but the margins are good.
Yeah.
The market is underserved, Actually, a company like Gramophone can get profitable by selling only in one district. It's such a large market. India has 1.3 billion people, 67% in rural India. A lot of them engaged in agriculture. You can actually make it profit in one district, right? So let's say if Gramophone runs out of money, right?
Right.
Okay, and there isn't other investment forthcoming. They can simply contract and say, boss, go deeper into one district and make money. So the business that way will be a going concern forever.
Yeah.
So to that extent, you mitigate the risk. And if you're not looking for an exit in 7 years, it's okay. Let him make it in 15 years. Let him make it in 20 years.
That's a very good point. So true patient capital, because impact investors often we call ourselves patient capital, but the reality is many of us do have fund structures, which are the same as any other fund structure. So we do have the same exit horizons, where real patient capital could come from a different kind of a balance sheet. Which brings me to the last kind of broad category of questions, which is this notion of domestic capital, or the scarcity of it, which is a big topic that everyone talks about, not just in the impact investment sector, in the venture capital sector. I think less than 10% of capital is domestic. I know that's slowly changing, but specifically in the context of these kind of investments, right? There's $1 to $5 to $10 million investments. There is an increasing interest from family offices, and there are platforms like Asha and others, which are kind of doing this to some extent, and folks like yourselves. And then there's also people, if you look at the range, who are doing this more philanthropically. Mr. Premji has just made a huge announcement, people like Ashish and all. There's folks like you and others who are frankly doing just as much work, but looking at it from more of an institutional building, or the Tata Sons kind of an approach of, portfolio building. So why is there such a dearth of domestic capital? Do you see that changing?
So I think Indians traditionally have not invested in risk, right? Unless it's within the family, right? So somebody in the family starting a business, you'll put money behind it, right? Now, why is that? I can't say for sure. Are we a lower trust society beyond our immediate social circles or community circles? I don't know. Is it that the mechanisms for, recovery are not that great? Okay, is it
Sorry to interrupt, but we're taking entrepreneurial risks. So Indians have become more entrepreneurial, right? But on the impact side, they often feel you're mixing the two things up. So are we just more skeptical that we don't believe that, look, you can't, either this, often they say either the charity or this.
I think it's really important. I think it's really important to, even if you want to do impact investing, to put a very hard commercial lens in front.
Yeah.
Because if you don't, what will happen is that you'll have a bunch of guys who are trying to do good, and they will perhaps lower the benchmark on quality of investment. And if that investment loses money, which perhaps many more will, then you will not be incentivized to invest more and more.
Correct.
So actually, if you want to scale up impact investing, you've got to make damn sure that impact investors make money. And they make money which is on par with commercial investment.
Yeah, which is what we're targeting for, which is what
if there
are delivering.
Therefore, you've got to be very, very discerning or whom to invest behind. Because the ones you invest behind, if they make money, they will scale. If they scale, they make impact.
Exactly.
So it's if you don't make impact, if you don't scale, you don't make impact.
Especially in a country like India, with the scale of the problems that we have.
And you will only scale if you're profitable.
Exactly. So
because beyond the point, you have to scale through internal accruals. You can't do investor money right through.
Exactly. So profitability drives scale, and scale is ultimately what drives impact. Fantastic. So in terms of what is your prognosis?
So actually, I'll rephrase that. You are doing disservice to impact investing if you are not applying a very hard commercial lens, because you're not creating enough successes then, which will encourage more and more impact investing.
And what do you think about this, how impact investing has panned out in the last 7, 8 years? So there have been some successes, but like we said, 90% of them have been in financial services, blockbuster successes, right? And not just in microfinance, and now in SME finance. We exited a company called Varthana, and there's many other exits that are happening, but people are asking where are those exits in other sectors. So now agriculture, healthcare, education.
So here's this. Capital tends to have a herd mentality.
Yeah.
Okay? So in the for-profit space, or in the traditionally non-impact space, the bulk of VC funding went into tech.
Yeah.
Why did it go into tech? Because tech could scale much faster, give exit in 7 to 10 years. There were historical cases and role models that, others have made money, we'll also make money. Right? ये China में हुआ तो यहाँ भी हो जाएगा. That kind of thing. So you really have to create new case studies. And now, therefore, why is finance working? Because you have some success stories. So now more and more will go into finance. The more you create success stories elsewhere, right, the more that sector will get funding, or that vertical will get funding. But
Exactly.
the first guy has to succeed, or the first two guys have to succeed.
Which is what one is seeing. So in areas like agriculture for sure, but even in an area which is not traditionally associated with high returns, which is waste management, it's happening, right? Again, because of those same factors, good entrepreneurs and regulatory tailwinds, whether it's the National Green Tribunal or other things. So you're right, so case studies or success stories would drive that. What is your prognosis of the next 5 years, given the macro headwinds actually, and the diciness of the economy, the entrepreneurship scenario, what's happening in Tier 2 India?
So good entrepreneurs,
So much competition.
good entrepreneurs and good companies will succeed. So that is a truism which will be run across all up cycle, down cycle, whatever, right? The other thing I'd like to point out is that, look, I don't know if liquidity will dry up or when it will dry up. I don't know. The international global environment is very, very uncertain. If the US-China trade war is resolved, liquidity will go up again, the party will carry on, right? But if it doesn't, if liquidity does dry up, so the one more thing which is true is great companies are capital efficient.
Yes.
So, money do you think Google raised before its IPO in its life?
Very less.
If I remember
Professor
correctly,
Motwani
it
had
was
only
25 million.
Yeah.
25 million. And look, and it didn't need the money, IPO money. So actually, Google has been built at 25 million. And look at the market cap today. Look at the impact today.
Yeah.
Right? Now, I'm not saying we're a great company, but we are perhaps moderately successful. Dockery raised a total of 7.3 crores, of which we used only 5 crores. The rest was in the bank. And then we didn't need any more money. Right? So, you got to look for capital efficient entrepreneurs. Right? Which means your business model, your business, your customer, what he's paying, frugal innovation, tightening the belt, the willingness to rough it out in tough times, the ability to rough it out in tough times. Have you built bad cost structures because you had too much money?
Yeah.
Now, in case liquidity dries up, all these things will be tested. And yes, there will be some bad news for some people, should liquidity dry up.
And finally, in terms of the role of government, I know many people say, well, government has nothing to do with market-based approaches to development, but they do provide an important regulatory environment and capital enablement. So they've launched this concept of a social stock exchange, and the IIC and many of its members are now working to figure out what does that mean. Is it for for-profits? Is it for not-for-profits? Is it a capital exchange? What's going to happen there? Even things like the CSR guidelines, which they recently reformed to allow blended finance and outcome funding, to say, look, this corporate CSR money, including from any corporate worth or more advanced in their thinking, can be going towards more for-profit social impact type of projects. So are you generally supportive of that? Do you see the potential for the government to do some of these regulatory tweaks? Or do you think it should be the government should do its job and the private sector should not really rely on that?
So I think, you've got to do what works. And what works may be different in different places, in different industries, different situations. But in general, what I have seen is that the more gateways and permissions or requirements of government permissions you introduce, right, into any system, the system slows down. So you end up doing in 3 years what you could have done in 1 year, right? And if that does happen consistently, right, you have a challenge. But let's take a look at 2 case studies here. One where government enabled, and one where government intervention was a disaster.
Okay.
Right? So when you look at the IT industry, right? So the IT industry grew and grew, and there was no Ministry of IT. It just happened, right? And then one day the government said, you know what? This industry needs a ministry. And we were all very scared, right? But that's one case study of when actually having a ministry and a progressive minister and progressive bureaucrats and progressive policies helped.
And NASCOM and a progressive industry leaders like yourselves and others.
The sector body, that helped. right? You were able to do stuff better. You were able to lobby better with international governments on visa rules.
Which is what we're trying to do here in a sense. We consider this a
right? And then let's take a look at the 70s. What happened to textiles and garments in India, right? Their government intervention was a disaster. And really, I mean, the Indian textile industry or the apparel industry, we lost out to China, Vietnam, Bangladesh in the global market. When actually apparel is a huge impact employer potential.
What specifically did they get wrong? I was not there in this.
So they're following this thing of promoting SMEs and small scale enterprises, small scale industries. And so there was this multi-fiber arrangement, I think, and GATT and, you know.
That's right.
Right? And so every country had a quota of exporting to Europe and US. So India decided to distribute this quota to small companies. Now, small companies were not necessarily best equipped to produce the best quality, have the best technology, at the lowest cost, and therefore service their customers better. And it became a situation where, you know, you would just float a company because you knew somebody in the Apparel Export Promotion Council that was distributing these quotas to buy a quota and sell it to somebody else and make a margin. Right? It's like booking a, you know, classical scarcity economy. It was a 17-year waiting list. I remember when I began my career, there was a 17-year waiting list to buy a scooter. So people would just apply and then earn premium, right? When their turn came, or there was an 8-year waiting list to get a telephone. You would, again, the quotas were like that. So basically, you ended up killing your potential for apparel export, or impairing it substantially because of flawed government policy, the wrong kind of entrepreneurs, a nexus.
Got it. No, fantastic. No, thank you so much for sharing these insights. I would just like to open it up to the audience in case there's any questions. We've got about 10 minutes max. We started about 5 minutes later, so we'll go a little bit extra. Are there any questions? Okay, great. So in that case, okay, please, sir, go ahead.
Hi, Kunal from Dalberg. First of all, thanks for this lovely discussion. It's been quite insightful. I know you guys have touched upon, the opportunity or investment opportunities in rural India. But I wanted to ask both of you in terms of how investors should think about the alliance of technology and opportunities in rural India. And I'm asking that because a lot of your businesses are sort of being enabled by technology platforms. And that might not necessarily happen in rural India because given the fact that digital access is limited, but more importantly, people in rural India are not very familiar on how to use technologies, right? So how should entrepreneurs and also probably people in this room, investors look at that?
It's changing faster than you think. You said Tausif is here. Where's Tausif?
He's right there. He's sitting right behind you.
Yeah, hi. So you want to tell him what's happening?
Yeah, that's a great suggestion.
I actually run a company called Gramophone, which Sanjeev and Karthik, both of them have invested in. I think we're working with farmers directly for the last 3.5 years, primarily around Madhya Pradesh and some parts of Rajasthan. What we have started like seeing, so I think there is a flawed sense of technology, what you are using it for. For us, there are two directions where we are going. How do you exactly enable the customers over there and your business in turn? So we basically are enabling farmers to grow more from the land they have, and primarily we are going after the agri input markets, which is basically supplying right quality.
May I interject? How many farmers have ever been in contact with you?
So right now around 3.25 lakh farmers have been in contact with us.
Okay, so out of those, how many do you think have WhatsApp?
Oh, around 50% of our customers have WhatsApp, 50%.
And the remaining contacts have been by phone, right?
Yes.
So there are 700 million unique mobile phone users in India. A lot of them are in rural India, right? Half of the people who've been in touch with them have used WhatsApp. I mean, so technology is spreading faster than we think, especially where there's utility.
Yeah.
So how Gramophone started was that they began an advisory service free of cost. 3 guys, IIT Kharagpur agricultural engineers, and then IIM Ahmedabad, agri management program. They let's pursue agriculture. Went to Indore, not the most likely place for you to find a startup to invest in, if you're a tech investor, right? And we are essentially tech investors. Okay, and they began advisory service. Call up this number, tell us what your problem is, and we'll give you expert advice. And they began to call up, sir, in this leaf, I'm facing this coloration. So in the beginning, the advice was on the phone. Then they said, okay, if you have WhatsApp, you can take a photo and WhatsApp a picture of the leaf. And then it'll go back. Now, these are guys who have some expertise, and they have other experts in the network. So they're giving good advice to farmers, whom farmers trust, they're building trust, and then they began to sell inputs. But it's all technology enabled, and it's in rural India. And it's working faster than you think. Is that a fair summary?
Yeah, absolutely correct. We started in 2016 when there was no smartphone. Like we assumed that there would be smartphone penetration by 2019-20, but that's how we started. We just went on ground. We started like getting calls from farmers because there was a problem which we were trying to solve. And then now we are getting into a stage where we are using technology to automate a lot of those things, where the solutions which were being given manually, one person was answering 100 queries a day. Today we are doing 1,000 because we have intervened in terms of digitizing everything on the back end, and one person can now respond to 1,000 queries. But still it's not been replaced by AI or machine learning. That process is going on. Probably next couple of years, more data would solve for that as well. So it's a gradual process.
So rural India is adopting technology immediately where it solves a problem.
Yeah.
Over time, other stuff also.
And I just want to add, it's not just in agriculture, in every business. I think that in rural India, or for technology adoption, there's three aspects, right? We don't see technology as a sector because in every sector, it's like an enabler, whether it's ed tech, ag tech, fintech, right? Whatever it is. So those three aspects are customer acquisition, right? So in Tausif's case, let's say he has got 100 farmers, of which is 50% have WhatsApp, 30% of them are ordering on the app. If they don't have the mobile phone ownership with the primary breadwinner, which is the father, the son may have it. The use cases may be there for entertainment or whatever, right? Data availability is there. So the customers are using it. Even if they're not, his field officers are using it. So that's the second use case for efficiency. You can dramatically lower the cost because you can train your guys to use it for lowering your costs. And the third is the product quality itself. Even if you're not doing that, you can collect back-end data on all of these customers, whether it's satellite data on farms or fintech data on whatever stuff they're doing, which improves your underwriting, which improves your product. So it's allowing massive leapfrogging. And it's not just about behavioral change, but you're right, ultimately, that's the nuance. The coolness of making a tech product like what Gramophone and others are doing is not the tech. The tech is pretty standard, but it's understanding what does that UX look like in Hindi or in Marathi or other languages. Not just the UX, the behavioral aspects. Does that guy want to call? Does he want to talk to someone with his accent or his specific dialect? Does he want to do WhatsApp? And figuring out that process chain. And that's what these fantastic startups are doing. Fantastic. Okay, now we've got some more questions. Okay, Jamuna, please,
Yeah.
and then yes, sir.
Yeah, hi. Hi, Sanjeev. Hi, Karthik. So I'm Jamuna from PwC. Sanjeev, you came in late, but before that, we were having many discussions of how we can support impact enterprises because the risks with them are much higher, and hence we need new kinds of instruments, and that was the strain of talk. And you, as a mainstream investor, are obviously looking at it differently. You're saying, like, look at the basic business, which not that impact investors do not, but definitely the risks are a lot more. I'm struggling to reconcile the two. I think this is a debate which has gone on for a long time, and I just want to understand from you, what is your thought on this side of the fence in terms of looking at impact enterprises where the risks are higher, hence, like for water, waste management. Those are some of the new areas that we are all looking at.
Look,
Now,
in my view, the risks are not necessarily higher. It's just that it's going to take longer. Okay, so your risk in a 7-year time horizon to get a good exit may be higher, but over a 20-year time horizon, it's okay. Maybe, right? Now, there are places where perhaps markets don't exist. Or where the main buyer is the government. That's a huge risk, according to me. Right? Because getting money out of the government is not something we are good at. Right? And I don't know who is good at it, what it takes to be good at it, but it's kind of hit and miss. Or if you're getting into water and you're saying, you know what, water will ultimately be priced commercially, and therefore we get in now, we'll make our money when people pay a commercial price for water, it's a huge risk according to me. I don't know when that will happen, because water in India is a public good. It is not a marketable product. Right? Those are high-risk stuff, according to me. But you will find pockets of really good investment opportunities if you look hard enough and understanding enough. Now, water may be a huge problem to solve, but maybe a private capital that's looking for a return, right? For that market, for that offering in that geography may not be the right opportunity. Maybe you need a different kind of capital there. But there will be opportunities if you look hard enough to find profitable investments in areas that make an impact. Now, in water, if you tell me, you know what, the investment is in a filtration device which is so good that you can take any water and it comes out as potable water, right? I'll say fantastic. If it's at the right price, it will find a market and people will buy it and you can make money. Maybe. But if it is, I'm going to sell irrigation water to farmers, I don't know.
And last question, Rahul from Invest India.
Thank you. My name is Rahul Nair. I head the Agni program at Invest India and at the office of the PSA. A quick comment and a quick question. This goes back to your point, Sanjeev. Thank you for making it, that there are things that rural people want. We ran field trials. I used to work for the office of the advisor to the Prime Minister. We ran field trials about 8 years back in rural Rajasthan around...
Can you be a little closer to the mic? I can't hear you clearly.
Should I get rid of this? Is this better?
Yeah, you can speak.
So we ran, I worked for the office of the advisor to the Prime Minister about 8 years back. A quick comment and then a quick question. And we ran some of the first field trials around rural digital services to explore precisely the question that you've been discussing. What do people want out of optic fiber at that point? So we went with the usual stuff. We offered them, market information, and we offered them, fill in government schemes and so on and so forth. The rural communities ignored all of that. All of that. There were just two that they picked up.
Yeah.
The first were land record certificates, because this is an agricultural place, and land records are how you get money. It's how you get your livelihood. And so all the men came for that. And when the men came, they figured out that you could get rural telemedicine. We could connect up their wives with the Obgyn facilities at the district. And then they came back with their wives. And once they'd come back with their wives, they came back with their elders. And the lines went round the block. And it took us a year to try and figure that out. We were quite slow. And they paid for it in many cases. My question to you against that backdrop is, how can we, ecosystem level, across the country, very practical, ground level, surface what these requirements are as a network, we're a convening platform at Agni, and then bring those to people like you, to people like everyone here, so we can start matching opportunity and start filtering them with some of your insight. Is there a practical way of doing that?
So look, my limited knowledge over here is that it's a bad idea to do it top down. Okay? You can't sit in Delhi and conceive of every opportunity sitting here. You can't even visit and as a tourist figure it out. Right? It's guys who are immersed in that system. You study the ideas, okay, and then you figure out this looks interesting. I'll back this guy. So we need 300 entrepreneurs to invest in one, right? Roughly, okay. And if you don't meet that many, you probably don't know good from bad, right? It's like batting practice, boss in the nets. And if you don't face enough balls, your capabilities aren't developed. Okay. So, if you'd asked us in 2010, you know what, I think it's a great idea to do a restaurant listing site. I'd say, are you crazy? But we stumbled upon Foodie Way, which then became Zomato afterwards. And then, you know what, this looks nice. Possibly. Or if you told me in 2007 that, you know what, let's do an insurance comparison site. It never occurred to us. I would never seen the opportunity. right? But Yashish Daya had been there, done that, done it for a European company, and he said, you know what, there's value here. So keep your eyes and ears open, meet enough people and listen, right? And you'll find enough good ideas, okay? So we would never have said, let's do an agri-input company here. But we stumbled upon these guys and we said, you know what, there may be something here. Or we've done this company, Shop Kirana. Now, Shop Kirana is counterintuitive, right? E-commerce is supposed to take over the world. Organized retail is supposed to kill the small retailer. And here is this company which is saying, out of Indore, you know what? I have found a pain point of the chotu last mile retailer. He doesn't get good enough service from the distributors of the big companies. Therefore, he has to go to the wholesaler to buy stuff, or he waits a few weeks, once in 2 weeks, the big company sales guy comes. And then he has to invest in inventory for 2 weeks, which may or may not sell, right? Can we, in a focused geography where there's enough density of small outlets, service guys on a daily basis? And if we can, and if we can do it profitably, we have a business. And so they ran a pilot with 1,500 chotu outlets in a 5-kilometer radius in Indore, and they made it work. And we said, they could be onto something here. It's still early days, right? But it looks like they could be onto something, right? And if they succeed, suddenly the chotu retailer will be competitive. And if they aggregate enough demand across all the hubs, if they go national, they can buy at modern trade rates, and they can pass on some of that benefit to the chotu retailer, and therefore those guys will get product cheaper and they can compete with big retail. Right? It's counterintuitive, it can work. And we would never have thought of it ourselves. You meet enough companies who stumble upon stuff like this. If you go top down, we say, you know what, we've got a job site, we've got a real estate site, let's do an auto classified site. Right? And then you go and invest in the 6th auto classified site because the other 5 are too expensive, and then your money goes down the tube.
Thank you, Sanjeev. That's a great note to close on, Rahul. I just wanted to add my 2 cents here. This notion of behavioral change, just linking it all up, and one of the main takeaways that we took away from this is that this natural traction, as you spoke about, and this inherent understanding of the customer and delivering services profitably, and what you guys are doing, and is exactly what's needed, which is to look at all of the behavioral aspects of the rural consumer with multiple companies going into it. All of us impact investors have been doing this for 10, 15 years, and I remember going back to before the microfinance crisis, let's say 2007, 2008, it's almost a decade back, some study was done. And at that time, we were all very naive, we didn't realize. So we were going and selling them what? Smokeless chula, solar lantern, and toilets. Saying, I'm a rich guy, I grew up in New York, and I go to the village, and I'm like, hey, why don't you buy these 3 things? And why aren't they buying it? And then you ask them, what do you want? And what do you think they said? They said gold coin, motorcycle, and mobile phone. So that classic thing of, and that's such a basic thing, right? I mean, now it's 10 years later, so what's needed is to do that in a much more sophisticated way. And the last example is, this is Abhijit and Esther Duflo, who just won the Nobel Peace Prize Nobel Economics Prize for Development. What is behavioral change? There's a development pathway to it, that if you give money to women, it's better for the family, but they'll also repay better. And then there's a business aspect to it. And in microfinance, all of us started our careers investing in microfinance. And this MIT JPAL lab had done a study on Spandana, right? Which was a big MFI company, and basically proved after like a 10-year multi-regression study that, and people at that time were disappointed that microfinance doesn't lead to development outcomes. What does it lead to? It leads to higher consumption of televisions and consumer durables. So what? Because that itself is a possible outcome. So I think that integration of these business principles and development principles is exactly what's needed so we can have a complete picture. And on that note, thank you so much, Sanjeev.
Thank you.
It was really a delight. And I'd like to just open it up to Neha to just do a formal closing. And thank you again for coming.
Good evening, everyone. What more can one ask for on a Wednesday for inspiration? To hear from stalwarts of the industry. Thank you very much, Karthik and Mr. Bikhchandani.